Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk some more about the north and south nodes, but we're going to talk about them having something to do with the MC-IC axis. I wanted to do this separately because the MC and IC, they can fall, if you're using whole signs, they can fall in houses other than the 10th house cusp. They could fall in they generally will fall somewhere along the 3-9, 4-10, or 5-11 axis. In more extreme cases, in the 2nd and 8th houses. And I've never actually seen this myself in practice with clients or with people that I know personally, but I've heard that they can fall in the 1st and 7th too. Have not seen this, but I would not doubt that it's possible. So I wanted to make a separate video about this for this reason, because it can fall in so many different places. So when you see the north node and the south node, let's start it off by saying, let's say you see the south node conjunct the IC. And let's say you see the north node conjunct the MC. And again, here, this is just my personal preference. You might decide that you want to loosen or tighten the orbs here. But I would probably be looking at an orb of 5 degrees applying or separating from the IC-MC axis in terms of conjunctions or in terms of squares. But you might want to do something different. Especially if you feel like there's some other connection somewhere in the chart that you should, loosen it or even tighten it. Obviously go with that. Sometimes I do too. But that's kind of my general rule of thumb, if you will. So if you see somebody with their south node conjunct the IC, you can think of it as the person, since the IC, the 4th house is the core, but the IC is it's like the deepest, most consciously personal part of yourself. So when you see the IC conjunct the south node, this part of them was a very, very big deal to them from a previous lifetime lens. Or they come into this lifetime just feeling comfortable with this. And again, comfortable, it's not always good. It just means they know it. They know it. Now, depending on what house, the IC falls in, let's say it fell in the 5th house, it might show that their core, that this deeply conscious and private part of themselves, perhaps it wasn't created by their blood family. Perhaps and their roots, perhaps it is created by other people. That seems possible. I might say the same thing if I saw the IC in the 3rd. Though I might think that this would have more to do with the core having been created by cousins, aunts and uncles, that kind of thing. Maybe something along those lines. Something along those lines. I know that there are a lot of different ways that you can go with the IC in the different houses, but those are just some ideas. I know there's a lot more that you could take into consideration there. But that this core of themselves, regardless of what house it falls in, is very, very important to them. They might keep more private. Those kinds of things, those kinds of ideas would come to mind. Now, if you have your north node conjunct the midheaven, and the midheaven is I've always thought of it as the highest and most idealized version of yourself. It is the version of yourself that you wanted to be when you grew up. that kind of thing. So having the North Node conjunct the midheaven means that you really wanted to grow into this version of yourself. And sometimes, well, a lot of the time, that means coming out of the most private parts of you and more stepping out. A lot of the time it does. If you have let's say you've got the midheaven in the 9th house, this might correlate to the highest and most idealized version of yourself having more to do with the actual journey, since 9th house is like journeys, and it can be other things too. But perhaps it's not so much about where you end up, but more about how you get there. If the midheaven is in the 10th house, you'd be looking at, stuff more about career and the public spheres of life, just generally. And if you have the midheaven in the 11th house, it's more about, I won't say like in retirement or anything, but it's more like, more long ranging, like, the most idealized version of yourself may not come out until you've already done your life's work, or kind of done what you set out to do, if that makes sense. Something along those lines. But they're usually the need to become the you that you wanted to be when you grew up is very, very, that's needed with the North Node conjunct the midheaven. Now let's flip this, and let's say you have the South Node conjunct the midheaven. This person might come into this lifetime already being comfortable with who that highest and most idealized version of themselves is. They might already have an idea of who that is and what that looks like, and how they can get there. This is already kind of known from a previous lifetime lens, or just what they come into this world comfortable with. And then, whatever house the midheaven actually falls in, we'll kind of flesh it out further. I'm not going to go through them all again. But when you see the North Node conjunct the IC, the person is already aware of kind of who they wanted to be when they grew up. They're already aware of that. I mean, obviously in this lifetime they still have to get there, but they're already aware of that energy. So in this lifetime, they wanted to learn more about their core. They wanted to learn more about them. Perhaps being more private about some things. Perhaps knowing what to be private about. Seems possible. Perhaps understanding their own roots better. Of course, all this will also depend on what house, the IC falls in, but those kinds of things seem important. And obviously, I would bring up home and family. I would bring up home and family too, even though home and family is more of a 4th house thing. If you've got like the IC in the 5th or the IC in the 3rd or wherever the fuck your IC falls, that home family energy is going to come into that house as well. So while the 4th house will always represent that too, if you've got your IC in the 5th, the 5th house will also have an undercurrent of this as well. Or a major current. It might be more major in your case. But yeah, the North Node IC person wanted to learn something about this. Now, if you see the North and South nodes squaring the midheaven and the IC, or MC-IC axis, something went amiss in a previous lifetime with the way the person balanced or handled both of these sides of life. because we're talking about squares to the nodes and skip steps. This could be something that the person abused, misused, ignored, didn't realize, may not have even ignored it, they just might not have realized what the hell they were doing. But there's there's generally something out of whack when it comes to how they function, how they function with their midheaven and with their IC. There's something kind of funky about it. And I would look at here, I would also look at what the planetary rulers of the IC and the MC are doing in the chart, where they are by sign and house. I think that, you know, along with looking at the planetary rulers of the North and South Node, you'd want to look at the planetary rulers of the MC and IC too, because sometimes they might be in different signs. Like, I'll use myself as an example. I have the 10th house. I have my South Node in the 10th in Libra, but my midheaven is in Virgo at 28 something Virgo. So they're not always going to be the same thing. They're not always going to be in the same sign. Now, you might be the sort that might not count conjunctions if they're not in the same sign. I do personally, but, you know, to each their own. But definitely you'd want to look at that too. Like if you happen to have, kind of like in my particular case, if you happen to have your midheaven or your IC in a different sign than the North and South Node and they're conjunct one another, you would also want to maybe look at why that is. Why you maybe set your chart up that way. Yeah, but I would definitely take that into consideration. And then sometimes, you know, you've got the South Node, say, conjunct the IC, and they're both in Scorpio. So then you'd just be looking at the rulership for Mars and Pluto for Scorpio. Or just Pluto or just Mars, whatever you want to use. But yeah, those are just some things to take into consideration when you see the North and South nodes involved with the MC-IC axis. So I'm going to get going. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I am at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Apaterno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to subscribe or whatever people do on YouTube, you can search for us, searching for Let's Fuck With Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing and you want to join us on the subreddit, come join us on Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.